So transfer of a patient with PPH. First, we have to manage the situation in the labor room or in the theater. For that, we have to alert our obstetric rapid response team or the cord blow team, counsel the bystanders about the need to refer and get their informed consent. A detailed reference letter with the details. The sequence of events, drugs, investigations, and treatment records have to be given them. Call up the referral center consultant and arrange the theater, blood bank, ICU, lab, and the labor room, and even the NICU. Arrange an ACLS ambulance with the accompanying obstetrician, anesthetist, and intensivist, and 2 nurses. We have already emphasized the need of a planned and equipped theater before referring the patient to the referral center. Meanwhile, in the ambulance, we have to continue the management of atonic PPH, a crash cart or an emergency trolley with all our emergency medicines, drugs, oxytocics. The patient has to be transported with 2 gray cannula, crystalloids, blood and blood products. Tranexamic acid has to be given, a continuous bladder drainage has to be put. And I have to emphasize the fact that a transvaginal uterine artery clamp should be put for this patient either with a atonic or a lower segment PPH, and don't wait for all the oxytocics to be over to put the clamp. The early putting the clamp will stop the bleeding at that point. And if the clamp is not available, a suction cannula, condom tamponade, or Beckery balloon has to be inserted. A cut down or an intraosseous method can be resorted to if peripheral or a central line is not available for us. In a case of traumatic PPH, we have to keep large packs. When I tell large packs, it should be so large so as to give tamponade to the abdomen or to the vagina wherever the bleeding has started, and mention the count in the reference letter. And tranexamic acid will also help. In DIC, already it has been discussed, don't overload, but don't be in a hurry to put the central lines in haste because we may injure the large vessels. A transvaginal uterine artery clamp should be put, packs can be kept, judicious decision on surgery should be put, and if we have planned a surgery, while concomitantly we are giving the blood and blood products, it should be the end surgery and not a conservative management. In a case of retained placenta, continue antibiotics and oxytocics. And already sir has told, if we have uneverly put a lower segment incision after delivering the fetus, don't pull at the placenta, close the cesarean section scar and pack the abdomen, and close the abdomen also, and send her in an ACLS ambulance and into a center where a relaparotomy can be planned with full backup, and not to a smaller center again. Inotropes and vasopressor should be in our armamentarium to continue our circulation, airway, breathing, drugs, and emergency medicines. So a crash cart and an emergency trolley with at least noradrenaline, adrenaline, dobutamine, vasopressin, and atropine should be there. And we should know that if we don't have any peripheral vein and the patient crashes in between, we can give adrenaline by IM, intraosseous, or the endotracheal tube. And maintain her mean arterial pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation, urine output, and if a central line is there, a central venous pressure also. A non-pneumatic anti-shock garment is a very useful device to shift the patient because it shifts the pelvic circulation into the aorta and the heart. And we know that it has 6 segments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 is for above the ankle, 2 for the calf, 3 for the thighs, 4 above the pubic bone, 5 compresses the uterus, and 6 is finishing the completion of the NASD application. So it gives some aortic compression also. And has to be noted that vaginal procedures can be undertaken without taking the NASD when we reach the referral center. And while removing the NASD, before removing each segment from 1 to 6, again, we have to wait each segment. After taking it, we have to wait 15 minutes, monitor her pulse and BP, then only take the next segment off. A massive transfusion protocol, don't wait in the institution where the hemorrhage has occurred and in the referral institution, it has to be instituted, and don't wait for the ambulance or the referral to take place for the transfusion to start. Keep the patient's temperature above 35, platelet above 50,000, fibrinogen above 200, and PTA-PTT less than 1.5. And the massive transfusion protocol round 1 should be started. And 4 units of O negative uncross-matched PRBC should be with us if possible, and 2 units of AB positive FFB, because they are the ideal needed in the first hour of the, if the patient doesn't pick up her BP. And in the second round, we can give calcium, cryoprecipitate, and wait for the lab reports. For the first round, don't wait for the lab investigations to come. Ensure adequate oxygenation and early intubation and ventilation on the way itself to prevent ARDS. And along with the routine investigations, a lactate, LFT, RFT, electrolytes to know whether the patient is going for a multi-organ failure, a fast abdomen and pelvis in the labor room or in the theater itself. A temperature should be maintained by fluid and blood warmer for all fluids we are giving, and a forced hot air blanket should be put over the patient when we are shifting the patient. And as already President Kumari Madam has told about the lethal quad in shock. What happens in this triad or quad is there is decreased myocardial performance, and as this virtuous circle goes on, our primary PPH would have solved, but the patient secondarily succumbs to a cardiac arrest. So a decision delay may cause the life of a patient. So we should set in before this triad gets established. And another thing is that an embolization or a factor 7A is not going to help a patient in shock or DIC. So please don't refer for the same. And in a case of uncontrolled PPH, also we should not go for these methods. And once the hemorrhage settles, thromboprophylaxis should start immediately after 12 hours. The referring institution itself should start the 0-hour bundle of preventing sepsis, the antibiotics, blood cultures, oxygen, fluids, and measuring the lactate and urine output, so that no litigations occur for the patient later on succumbing to a cold septic shock. And once we reach the referral center, or if we have time in this referral center, how to identify whether our hemorrhage is going to sepsis, which may prevent us from litigations, is measuring the lactate, base deficit, and mixed central venous oxygen saturation, which can be done in higher centers. Suppose the patient crashes on the way in the ambulance, we have to know the chain of survival if cardiac arrest ensues. Activate the emergency response system, which is already there. We have the whole team in front of us in the ACLS ambulance. Give high quality CPR, go for a rapid defibrillation if there is ventricular tachycardia or fibrillation, and give the basic and advanced emergency medicine services, and the post-arrest treatment can occur in the referred institution. So we have now got the ACLS 2020 guidelines in June, and we have all to be well versed with the cardiac arrest guidelines. So in summary, we have to be supportive to the patient, but protect yourself from litigations, and especially from going in for depression after that situation. Proper documentation or step-by-step and multidisciplinary approach will help us to improve the patient. And you have to know that a shock index, that is a heart rate divided by the systolic BP, if it is more than 1.7, it is very critical. So when it goes more than 1 itself, refer the patient or use a Muse chart in your labor room in all laboring patients, so that we will get to know the cases which we have to refer earlier. Procure all the instruments which were discussed in these sessions. Procure the skill, procure the personnel, and a timely decision on what to do and what not to do. And there will be many loose talk behind us. So don't worry on that, and understand that this phase will also shall pass. Thank you.